Good evening, everyone, and a very hearty welcome to the first episode of Refractive Brand Rounds, hosted by Jyoti LASIK Center. So before we start the program, I would invite Dr. Aishwarya Shashi, who's just graduated from St. John's Medical College. She has won the Best Research Scholar Award in St. John's. That's a great achievement. She's been the literary secretary, and poetry, creative writing, essays, and music is her passion. And she's none other than daughter of our own Dr. Jyoti Menon. So I just invite her to invoke and take blessings of God before we start this webinar. So Aishwarya, on to you.
I'm Aishwarya. I'll be singing Mahaganapatim in Ragam Tilang, set to Aditalam. Mahaganapatim manasa smarami Mahadevanutam shirasa namami Mahaganapatim manasa smarami Mahadevanutam shirasa namami Mahaganapatim Shatakoti Vigna Parihara Charanam Shantyadi Sarva Kalyana Gunatam Shatakoti Vigna Parihara Charanam Shantyadi Sarva Kalyana Gunatam Nirantaram Nikila Lokaham Shiva Nirantaram Nikhila Lokaham Shiva Param Padam Pradam Satatam Param Padam Pradam Satatam Mahaganapatim Manasa Smarami Mahadevanutam Shirasa namami Mahaganapatim Manasa Smarami Shirasa namami. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aishwarya. That was very, very, very beautiful. Thank you so much. So a brief thought process on why we just started it. Hearty welcome to all of you. So we at Team JLVC wanted to do this series for quite some time. I wouldn't call it a webinar or a CME, but it's a group discussion which we do every week. So the plan for the few weeks, I don't know how many months we'll take it, we'll see how it goes, would be a crisp talk on a selected topic, which will be announced a week before. We would try to pull out 2 cases from all the delegates, BOS, outside BOS, inside JLVC, anything interesting in refractive. And it'll be a roundtable discussion. After the talk, we just leave it open and all of us can put in our thoughts about the case presentation. And the whole idea is to make it very, very informal. We'll have a lot of mutual discussions. And we encourage you and we please request you all to bring up your cases, may it be simple, complicated, easy, whatever. And once in a while, we'll have a few invited lectures from star surgeons throughout India and probably outside as well. And we have a list of topics, but we can always change it according to what our delegates want. And the entire format is a very fluidic thing. So we'll take it over and see how to change it according to what our delegates want. And something very closely we would want to do is we'll give a lot of time for discussions. So though we have a schedule for each day, each week, let's not have any time limitations. We can discuss to whatever extent we want. And any pending topics, we can always carry over to the next week. So I think this sort of mutual discussion will help people who start, people who want to refine, and also who want to master refractive surgeries. And one common question I got is why so late? So we thought we'll meet up late. Now with the COVID, we may be finishing our clinical work early, but in few months, we may have to get back to a previous routine. So we thought we'll have the best and most relaxed time, come back home, have dinner, and then start. So that is the whole idea why we thought we'll keep it 9 to 10 so all of us can be done with whatever work we have and commitments we have in the night. So this is basically what we are going to take over in the next few months. So we'll start from the very important topic, most important topic of refractive assessment. We'll go on to very detailed discussions on pentacam and other analysis. We'll look at surgical planning, especially because we're going to get the transepi and we have been having the contour. So we'll have some experts speak on how to start planning for transepi. We'll have step-by-step from experts on surface and flap techniques. We'll also present our complications and how we managed it. We can always bring our troubleshooting patients, fussy patients, and discuss with our expert panel. And let's also try to put in a lot of legal aspects with LASIK, consent taking, counseling, that very, very important practical part of surgery as well. So the pre-LASIK assessment will be the first 6 weeks. We'll concentrate. I think this is the most important thing, especially beginners will have quite a few issues, especially in a place like Bangalore, where we have a lot of corporate crowd. I think our pre-LASIK assessment should be perfect to get a good results. So today we'll have Dr. Jyoti, who will discuss on these very 4 important topics of how to take history, what are the systemic associations, contraindications, especially, and clinical examination. So she and her team have really worked hard. We have done a lot of literature search. She has also discussed with a lot of her other specialty colleagues to take their take. So we'll see what she has to take. And as and when we'll go ahead with a detailed diffraction, pentacam, we'll have a retina specialist who would speak to us about LASIK and what the retina has to help us in taking some decisions during the LASIK. And we'll have a session on the practical points. So I would also request all of you to please send me your mobile number. So we are creating a WhatsApp group, or you can just text your full name with your mobile number in the chat box now so that we can create a group so mutual interaction is much easier. So hearty welcome from Team JLVC to each and every one of you. So I request Dr. Ravindra to welcome the gathering again and probably give us a small insight of what is JLVC, because he's been one of the founders of the LASIK Center. So Dr. Ravindra, to you.
Thanks, Deepti. I would like to happily go back 22, 23 years ago when a group of young doctors and senior doctors of Bangalore came together, and we had probably about 24 meetings, in various places as to how to go about. We all decided to start our own LASIK center for one reason, that it's a very heavy investment and it should not be a burden for one individual practitioners. And the most important thing that's happened in JLVC is group learning. 22 doctors are operating, and if I learn something, I'll immediately share that with the entire group. If I have some difficulty at some point of time, again I'll share it, and the learning becomes extremely steep instead of a flat. Instead of learning over 50 cases, we learned what we need to do in 5 cases. JLVC, we had a commitment that we'll have to keep to the quality. We bought the best machine available in the world. We could afford to do it because it's a money belonged to 20 people, and we took loan, and whatever that's best at that time and best at every point of time till today, we have purchased at JLVC. Group learning is one big thing, and it's never a burden for each one of us. We can take our patients and do the surgery and come back. We have a beautiful facility with excellent operation theater, and more than that, we opened it to our colleagues in Bangalore. It's not restricted to the initial 20 investors, but we wanted happily to share the knowledge that we have with the rest of them. Academic discussions were intense. We had discussions and learning groups, and we used to start learning at 10 o'clock. Anything that came up new, we started with wavefront abrometer. That's one of the first in the country. The Allegretto we bought is the first machine in the country. Everybody were talking about nonsense technology at that point of time. We were the first people in the country who brought in latest flying spot technology to India. And after that, we had wavefront guided treatment, we have topo guided treatment, we have Contura. Anything that came in the market for the first time, we got it at Jyoti Lasik Vision Center. Friends, you should always remember that the 20 people who have sweated all along for 20 long years, we have not taken any returns from the company. We had a policy that anything that we earn is put back to the company, put back to Jyoti Lasik Vision Center, right then and there. We bought machines instead of enriching ourselves. And Jyoti has, and all people have so nicely managed it. Even our annual meetings were with zero budget. We spent nothing on our annual meetings, no trips, no festivities, but we were all sort of fasting just to ensure that the center grows. Center has reached this place. We'll be soon upgrading our machine again, though we have a very good machine with us. And I should remember very fondly our good friend, Dr. K.R. Murthy, who was the pillar behind this, who is the person who moved everything and brought in 20 people and sailed along with us. Hats off to him. He is an excellent individual, and his spirit, his motivation, his leadership saw that JLVC is an entity today. JLVC is a classic example what a few doctors together can do. There were senior most people, there are junior most people, but once we enter JLVC, we were on one platform. There's nothing seniority, nothing junior. Everybody were equal. And anybody can manage the center. Anybody can put in efforts to the center. And based upon this, I think this is one of the most successful projects in the whole country. And based upon it, a lot of centers came all around, and it doesn't pinch us financially, and we have the best technology to use on our patients. So JLVC is thankful to Karnataka Ophthalmological Society. I think Dr. Arun is here. And Dr. Elan is here from BOS, and they're very, very encouraging to all our projects. I would just request both of them to say a few words before we start off with academics. Dr. Elan, you can unmute. Would you say a few words, Dr. Elan?
Sorry, sir.
Would you want to say something?
No, sir. It's an excellent program which is designed by Dr. Deepti, and really thankful to JLVC, all the organizers for bringing it under BOSS and KOS. That's all, sir. We'll go ahead.
Thank you.
Excellent program has been designed, actually.
Dr. Arun is here from KOS. Would you like to say something, Dr. Arun?
Yes, sir. I am very happy to be associated with this. I am the scientific convener for the BOS, and Dr. Deepti is also with me. Yeah. So she is also part of the MC for BOS. Okay. And all the best for the venture, sir. Excellent venture that Dr. Deepti has started.
Dr. Elan, do you see anybody from KOS here?
Sir,
Viola, sir, had to.
Viola, I don't see his name.
Yeah,
he's not there. Even I checked, sir.
Maybe next time we'll invite him, and we will request him to say a few words. Dr. Deepti, it's all yours now.
Dr. Divakar is there. Dr. Divakar is the person who gave us permission from KOS to.
Yes, he is the president. Yeah, he is the Dr. Divakar.
Hello, sir. Dr. Divakar here. All the best for the programs from JLVC. We have seen the growth of JLVC from beginning when it started. I were there for the inauguration and everything. So this will be very useful to all of us, and I hope I will good luck and all the best for the program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So I invite Dr. T.K. Ramesh sir and Dr. M.S. Ravindra to be the moderators and panelists for today's session. And would also welcome Dr. Prashant, who's our dynamic secretary this year. And thank Dr. Ravindra, Dr. Prashant, and Dr. Preeti Manjunath, who really were the backbone for this idea and pushed us to start this series. So without further ado, Dr. Jyoti, can we have your presentation? So I would request all of you to put in your queries, comments in the chat box. So once Doctor is done with her presentation, we can take it up.
ಇದು ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಆಗಿತ್ತು. Hello.
Yes,
we can hear you.
You're audible.
You can talk.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Let's get started.
You're audible, doctor. You can.
Just one.
No.
So let's get started.
Yes,
after,
yes.
Yeah. After recording all the patient details, pay attention to the age of the patient. For LASIK, age should be above 18 years. And in patients who are nearing 40, that is the presbyopic age group, one need to explain the need for wearing near vision correction after the LASIK surgery, and also discuss the possibility of monovision. So if you have a female patient who is in the childbearing age group, don't forget to ask these few questions. Firstly, are you married? Are you pregnant? So are you having a baby and are you feeding the child? And are you planning for a pregnancy? So all these questions are very pertinent, because when the patient comes, they may not reveal all the details to you unless you actually ask for them. And you
Dr.
might
Jyoti,
miss.
You'll have to do full screen. Is it possible? Slideshow. Earlier, yeah, perfect.
So the reason for this is pregnancy and lactation is a relative contraindication. It's a contraindication for laser refractive procedures. The reason being, during pregnancy and lactation, there will be hormonal changes that can affect the refractive status as well as the keratometry readings. And only after cessation of lactation and 3 months after cessation of lactation, and if the stability of refraction and keratometric values are obtained, should you plan your LASIK surgery. In medical history, so there are many young diabetics out there who might even not know that they are diabetic. All of us do the blood sugar recording for cataract surgery, but please check GRBS before any laser refractive procedures. So diabetes is also a relative contraindication for LASIK surgery. The reason being, uncontrolled diabetes can lead to inaccurate refraction. It also causes poor wound healing, and diabetic patients can have many complications like persistent epithelial defect, and they are prone for infection. So all these factors should be considered. So when do you take up a patient with diabetes for surgery? So when the patient is under tight glycemic control. So that is, fasting blood sugar must be less than 130. Postprandial blood sugar must be less than 200. Patients should not have any ocular or systemic complications of diabetes, such as retinopathy, nephropathy, or neuropathy. And urine sugar should be nil with microalbuminuria less than 30. So there are several papers studying the results of laser refractive surgery in diabetic patients. So with tight glycemic control, many have obtained very good results. So another important point in medical history are the history of autoimmune disorders. According to FDA, autoimmune disorders are contraindication for LASIK surgery. So what disorders are there in this? Rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, all these ankylosing spondylitis, systemic vasculitis, all these autoimmune disorders cannot be taken up for refractive surgery unless because Following refractive surgery, they can have haze, and they may have a pre-existing dry eye that can be worsened by surgery, and they may be on immunosuppressants or steroids. So there are varying opinions. There are a couple of pilot studies and also different studies which has done LASIK on patients with remission of the disease and found good results. So it is up to the surgeon's risk appetite. So there is one study, pilot study with 42 eyes, and where the author has claimed good outcomes. These numbers are very less. And there is another study with 622 patients. And again, the authors have concluded that LASIK can be safely performed in patients with well-controlled collagen vascular diseases. Probably you should be in touch with a rheumatologist to go ahead with the surgery. In drug history, most of our LASIK patients are young patients, and many of them suffer from acne. Isotretinoin is one of the drugs that is commonly used for the treatment of acne. So I had a patient, she was a model on isotretinoin, and luckily for me, she volunteered the information. She told, I am on these for acne treatment. So only when I went and saw the literature, I was surprised. It is all over. So it is a contraindication according to FDA for LASIK surgery, because this drug affects the corneal sensitivity, and it also affects healing. It delays the healing, and you can also have corneal melt. So better to stop the medicine 6 months. Okay. So there are various studies. Some say you should not do LASIK, and some say you can do LASIK to wait 6 months after cessation of isotretinoin. So please look at the patient's face. If they have acne, please ask for any treatment history, because these are the patients who are bothered cosmetically, and that's why they've come for LASIK in the first place. So in occupational history, many a time you have patients who want to join defense services where they need an uncorrected visual acuity of 6.6. Okay, so in such patients, it is preferable to avoid a flap surgery, because flap can be visible on slit lamp. Unless they actually ask for previous corneal surgery history, you don't have to tell that. Okay, and there are people who are into active mountaineering, trekking, and such hobbies. And if you are planning a surface ablation, the first 3 months UV exposure can be detrimental, and it can result in haze. So please talk to the patient. Are you willing to be off all these activities for 3 months minimum? If not, better to go for a flap procedure. In patients who are into contact sports, better to avoid flap procedures. Okay, so, and there are people who, please ask this question, do you drive at night? So in patients who drive at night, the night vision requirements are very important. You have to pay special care to the size of the pupil and make sure the ablation zone is bigger than that. And you have to discuss about night vision problems with such patients. Family history. One of the most important diseases you have to rule out in family history is that of keratoconus. So I had twin patients for LASIK surgery. They wanted the surgery on the same date. So the first twin assessment was done. Very slight borderline. I thought I could do with a surface ablation. But when his brother came, he had frank keratoconus in one eye. So I canceled both the surgeries. So if you have a patient with a sibling having keratoconus, that is a red flag. So in the presenting history, you must ask what age the refractive error began. So usually myopia, we find that it grows in 5 to 6 years age group. Whereas if they started wearing spectacles and having problems in teenage, it can be keratoconus. And also you must have refractive stability for minimum 1 or 2 years. So what is refractive stability? There should not be more than 0.5 increase in sphere or cylinder in the past 1 year, and some studies say 2 years. So you can rely on old records or patients' spectacles if they have been wearing the spectacles for more than 1 or 2 years. in ocular history, sometimes we do get patients from outstations who call you up and say, "Doctor, I want to get LASIK done. I'm coming from this place on this date." So please ask, do you wear contact lens? So if, especially for outstation patient, if they are wearing contact lens, ask them to discontinue contact lens for 1 or 2 weeks before coming to the place to get the LASIK done, so that it will save them one trip. And you can, if things are all right, you can straight away do LASIK. And what type of lens they wear, how many hours they wear, all these are important. So you have to stop contact lens. Rough guideline is for soft contact lens, we stop for 1 week. For toric contact lens, we stop for 2 weeks. And for RGP lens, anything between 6 weeks to 3 months. Because though in some patients, they achieve stability after 6 weeks, if it is ill-fitting contact lens and there is corneal warpage, you can see topographic keratometric changes occurring even after 6 weeks. So history of glaucoma must be sought, because if you are applying suction, then the pressure will go up. So you should avoid a flap procedure, and post-op steroids can elevate the pressure, and IOP measurements may be dicey after LASIK surgery. In history of prior ocular surgery, sometimes they would have undergone squint surgery in childhood and they may not remember to tell you. Especially it will be done under GA in childhood. So please ask for the parents for history of any squint surgery, or ask them to check with their parents. So any squint correction and any patching for amblyopia. Here, if the vision acuity is not 6/6, please inform the patient. Post-op, you can expect the same visual acuity what you have with the spectacles pre-op. It may not be better, because many a time they think after LASIK they will get 6/6 vision. Okay, sometimes you may get 1 or 2 lines more, but then it is better to under-promise and over-deliver. We have a separate topic on refraction. Refraction is of utmost importance to get a successful result. So I will tell you just 3 points. Contrary to the popular belief, myopes do accommodate. So it is generally believed myopes don't accommodate, but they do accommodate. So please do a cycloplegic refraction and do a retinoscopy. And retinoscopy must be done not by the optometrist, by the doctor, so that any scissoring of reflex can be picked up in the initial examination itself. And also the dominant eye you can check. When you check the dominant eye, if you are planning monovision, it is important to correct the dominant eye for distance. You can take a small cardboard, have a hole at the center, ask the patient, keep the cardboard at 40 centimeters from the eye, ask them to fixate at a distant object. When you cover one eye, you can see the spot. When you cover the other eye, you can't see the spot. The eye with which you can see the spot is the dominant eye. So keratometry, we can do keratometry either using a keratometer or using an autorefractometer. Please look at the rings on the keratometer itself. So in keratoconus, you can see the crowding of rings, and the distance between the rings will not be uniform. So I would like a cornea between 42 to 46 diopters. So if you have a flat cornea with diameter 41 or less, you have to anticipate a free flap and take appropriate measures like increasing the hinge width. If you have a steep cornea above 46, be prepared. You can have buttonholes, so you need to take special precautions and reduce the hinge width. And also, even if the Pachy is very good, we have a range of K to play around that is only between 36 diopters and 50 diopters. If you flatten a cornea less than 36 or steepen a cornea more than 50, then the quality of vision will be very poor. So if a patient has 40D cornea, flat cornea with -8 refraction, and the post-LASIK it will be 32 diopters, even if Pachy is 580, you cannot operate on such a patient. So you have to see the size of the palpebral fissure. Sometimes we do get patients with small palpebral fissure. Once or twice, when we tried to put the suction ring, we were unable to put, there was no space after putting the irrigating speculum. We could not put the suction ring, and we have to remove the speculum and then put the suction ring. So if you have deep set eyes or a small palpebral fissure, better to go for a surface ablation. And you have to do the cover test and alternate cover test and see for any phorias or tropias. And nystagmus is also a relative contraindication for LASIK surgery. Please check the sac. For cataract, all of us will do it, but please do Rho Plus for LASIK patients as well. In slit lamp examination, so most of these patients who come for LASIK, many of them are contact lens wearers, and they do have poor tear film. They may have blepharitis and meibomian gland disease. So these have to be carefully looked for in slit lamp in the preliminary examination itself. So if they have blepharitis, please treat the blepharitis before the LASIK surgery. You can give warm compress or whatever, you can do the treatment and even systemic doxycycline. Because if blepharitis is untreated and you do LASIK surgery, you can end up in DLK or post-op infection, which you do not want. And also papillary conjunctivitis is very common in contact lens wearer. So avert the lid and examine the patient. Another finding in long-term contact lens wearers, you do see peripheral corneal vascularization. So in patients with more of peripheral corneal vascularization, if you are planning LASIK, you have to use a smaller ring size in order not to cut the limbal vessels, and the blood will seep into the interface during the surgery. You don't want that to happen. And also patients with smaller corneal diameter, you can either measure with caliper or you can even get a rough idea from the pentacam or topography. So if it is 11.5, it should be about 12, it is fine. If it is smaller, you also look at the patient. When you keep the suction ring, you have to take a ring that is smaller in diameter. And corneal scars can affect the transparency, and also for femtolaser, you need a transparent cornea. And they also cause artifacts on topography. Herpetic keratouveitis is again a contraindication for LASIK surgery. Look for signs of keratoconus and evidence of corneal dystrophy that can cause recurrent corneal erosion. How do you do this? You need to use retroillumination, high magnification, and do a careful slit lamp examination. Also, look for any lens opacities. If you know they are congenital and stationary and do not affect the vision, you can go ahead with LASIK surgery. But if it is incipient cataract with progressive in nature, don't do LASIK surgery. Laser refractive procedures can affect the tear film. So you need to see the tear meniscus, breakup time, and also Schirmer. Remember that Schirmer will test the quantity of the tear film, while breakup time gives the quality of tear film. Corneal sensation also has to be checked. Intraocular pressure has to be measured, and if found high, the other investigations like disc analysis and field analysis should be done. Pachymetry. You can get the pachymetry. You can do the pachymetry by ultrasound or OBSCAN or pentacam or OCT. Whatever the method, the thinnest corneal reading is taken for safety. Any difference between two eyes more than 20 microns and paracentral thinning, then those are red flags. And if the pachymetry is very low, you plan for a surface ablation. If you are planning an enhancement, OCT is an accurate method to measure pachymetry, and also it will give the thickness of the corneal flap in the previous surgery. So pupil size, there are fancy pupillometers which may be uniocular or binocular, but if you don't have them, no worry. When you do the autoref reading, you can see the pupil size. That will be the photopic pupil size. You put a towel on patient's head, and again you can see it in the ARK. You can see the pupil size. That will give a rough idea how much is the pupil. If you have an access to binocular dynamic pupillometry, then you can get a very standardized reading. Also, it is a good practice to record axial length of the patient. It will help in two ways. Please do an A scan for all your LASIK patients. You can laminate and give it to the patient for the future use. And also, if the patient has to know whether it is a regression or an increase in myopia due to increase in axial length, you can, at a later stage, you will be able to identify what is the problem. So the other corneal imaging and fundus examination will be dealt separately. Contrast sensitivity, ocular response analyzer, all these will come in the later talks. So from this talk, what are the contraindications for LASIK? So once again, just to revise the contraindications, firstly, keratoconus or abnormal topography, FDA considers, so FDA consider, I do not say it is absolute contraindication, FDA considers collagen vascular disease, autoimmune disease, immunodeficiency disease as contraindications, pregnant or nursing mother, isotretinoin and amiodarone use. Okay, so where you have to exercise caution, tread with caution, where the patient has severe allergies, you will have to wait till the eye is not irritable, eye is quiet and not in an allergic season. And history of herpes simplex or zoster keratitis, diabetes, and patients who are prone for keloid formation. So precautions, patient under 18 years, we are not doing LASIK now, and patients with other problems such as any corneal abnormality and previous ocular surgery. Suppose you are planning for correcting post-op surprises following cataract surgery or post-keratoplasty LASIK or laser refractive procedure. So all those patients, you need to exercise a lot of caution. So this is an update on the contraindication literature search. More randomized clinical trials are needed to establish the safety. So many of the authors do not agree with FDA. They do say more studies are required because you can revise the contraindication for LASIK, but it is left to the surgeon's choice. Another important factor is the psychological assessment of the patient. So when you talk to the patient, please make sure you do talk to the patient at least once. You can find that they ask a lot of questions. They are extremely demanding, and there are patients who are on impulse wants to do LASIK surgery. Please give them time to think and get back. Don't take them up for surgery. And patients who want guarantee on the result and they are not okay with accepting any possible risk. So these are all not good candidates for laser refractive surgery. You need to talk to the patient regarding the safety of the procedure, the risk of, even if it is rare, possible complications, and understand patient expectations. So in summary, you get the best result with proper pre-op evaluation, proper communication, and selecting the appropriate patients. And the success of the LASIK is in telling no for those patients whom LASIK is contraindicated. Thank you. And I wish to thank Dr. Deepti for helping me with the literature search, and also Dr. Preeti. And I wish to thank Dr. Prashant for giving me this opportunity, and Dr. Ravindra sir and Dr. T.K. Ramesh sir for helping me with this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jyoti. I think that was a marvelous job. You have covered each and every point which a refractive surgeon has to look at. Now, Dr. Ravindra, I would want you to answer this. I think what she covered about the age demand is very true. We see a lot of patients on isotretinoin. And I think over the last 1 to 2 years, we are really picking it up. And Dr. Jyoti said, observe the face. So that is what I was observing before. But now I see a very clear face, perfectly fine. There'll be a tiny pimple somewhere, which I hardly can see. And they are on isotretinoin. So people are very cosmetically conscious. And I spoke to a lot of my dermatological friends. The threshold for isotretinoin is very low because the patients are demanding. So now with the mask, it's absolutely tough. And a lot of patients with the acne on their back for which isotretinoin is given, and the face is fine. So I think it's a good idea to have a questionnaire because it's saves a lot of chair time. So your optometrist just ticks it over. And that is how. So one practical question I would want Dr. Ravindra to answer is, Dr. Jyoti, we have all had a lot of patients who sit on our head, say it's been 3 months, I've stopped, you please do it, whatever risk I've understood, but I'm okay to, bear that small risk, because most of these people are traveling abroad or have their wedding. So after knowing everything, they're still agreeing to take that risk. So what would you tell these patients, and with the proper consent, would you still go ahead with the surgery? There are a lot of articles today which do say isotretinoin is safe, but only thing is it's an FDA contraindication. So as a clinician, what would your thought process be?
Jyoti has to stop sharing the screen.
See, my personal input here is LASIK being a cosmetic surgery. It's not. There is no medical indication for LASIK. Very few medical indications. I think we'll have to be. It's like a double-edged sword. I mean, it's good to say, like the patients beg so many things because they have been pressurized by the family, by the fiancés, whatever it is, and they'll come asking for so many things. But when a problem occurs later, 6 months later, 1 year later, when they come with the in-laws, when they come with the friends, they discuss with the lawyers, I think we'll get into problems. You don't earn much money in LASIK at all. It's like doing Calazian surgery. If you look at the economics of LASIK, it's extremely affordable and cheap in India. And it's best not to take any risks of any kind. I mean, because it's been written in literature that it's a contraindication or it's a relative contraindication if somebody is taking this drug for pimples or for any other reason. And I think, Deepti, you pointed out, a lot of patients' face is very clear, and you should not presume that they're not on retinoic acid. You'll have to, sometimes they don't know what is the medication. What I ask them is to get all the skin creams they apply. They have to bring it and show it to us, or at least tell the names of them, then we'll have to check. And there are many brands available. So it's best not to accept it. Our cutoffs is about 6 months time from the time they stop. I think it's best to restrict to that. And all these formats, like, for a cosmetic surgery, you may take a consent, you may take a written consent, you may take a video consent. But if you are in front of the magistrate or a powerful lawyer, these are useless. Best to protect your skin rather than risk it, even by an iota.
Sure. And a very good point Dr. Jyoti mentioned was about RGP lenses. So again, we'll have to be specifically asking them what contact lens, because many times our optoms may just write contact lens. So please ask for soft, toric and RGP. And one very useful tip which we follow is, say a patient is in a hurry and can't wait for 6 weeks after RGP. So what we generally do is call them after stopping it for minimum 4 weeks. You can do a topography and call them back again after a week and do the topography. So if the topography is stable, then after 4 weeks, it should be okay to take. But if it is still steepening, then probably he's still in the wire page time. So at least give another month. So that is a practical tip which we follow.
Dr. Deepti, one point I would like to say about toric lenses. I think toric lens, I would like to certainly wait for at least 3 to 4 weeks time. 2 weeks is too early a period to consider it for a treatment. You have to stop. You have to literally tell them to stop for good, because they, start tweak it. They cheat themselves by going for a party for 3 hours. 3 hours, nothing will happen. They say. Soft lens again. There are a lot of people are still wearing long-term soft lenses, annual soft lenses, where the latent period is much higher than 1 week. 1 week, 10 days is for soft disposable contact lenses. And if they're wearing annual contact lens, it's as good as 3 to 4 weeks of waiting. The RGP lens is minimum is 5 to 6 weeks time. 6 weeks is the cutoff for RGP. And again, the more reliable index is how much of stability of topography is there between. You cannot compare between pre-operate. See, you have removed contact lens today. You have taken a topography today. No, you have to take the first topography should be 6 weeks later, not now, or 5 weeks later, or a month later. Then repeat 2 weeks later. It's not that you are doing it now and 5 weeks later. There will be a huge difference. So the corneal warping is a slow process in these patients, and we'll have to look at the topography changes over a period of 10 days, today and 10 days later.
I think there are a lot of questions coming up about defense. Dr. Alan has also written a few things. So Dr. Alan, how do you practice when person comes only for defense? What are your step-by-step protocols usually?
In fact, now, I think it was around 5 or 6 years back, there was a new guidelines that were released by the Defense Forces, particularly Air Force. If I remember correctly now, it is only Navy that has an absolute contraindication to any kind of refractive procedures. All other defense forces allow refractive surgery, but what they don't specify whether it is surface ablation or LASIK. In fact, many of the forms, if you see, it is mentioned as LASIK, not as laser procedure. So first we have to find out what post this person is applying for, and it is our duty to explain to that person that these are the limitations. You cannot, like a person undergoing a pilot training, you should be clearly explained that you're never going to be a fighter pilot in your life if you undergo this. This has to be explained. In fact, there is another thing that was released by the defense. They are allowing with glasses also for some of the fields. So this also has to be explained to the patient. You can attend with glasses also if that is okay with you. The next point is coming to the recruitment. In case of any doubts, in fact, in Hubli, there was a blanket order when they were recruiting for some of the posts that they should have a topography and a pachymetry in hand. This order was there. It was a blanket order for some time. I don't know whether it has been removed. But what is definitely being done is, if there is any doubt on examination, they are asking for these two tests. So we should also tell the patient not to hide anything. The other reason why surface ablation became popular among pilots was, this was from the US Defense Forces, is because it was noted that with a flap, when they go up, there used to be edema. So that is why surface ablation was preferred. But off late with the flaps, what we are doing, I have not heard this complaint from any of the pilots, though I don't have a study to support this.
That's interesting. Recently, they told me that as well, that topography has become a part of it. And one more clause, the best is to ask them to bring their prerequisites, because a lot of these areas have an axial length cutoff. Yes. So we have had patients who are perfectly willing, but their axial length was not matching. So they opted out of LASIK because that's impossible for us to change. So it's always nice before you do it to ask them to bring the entire list and cross-check it. So high axial length, in spite of 6'5", they do not agree.
In AFMC, they don't. For postgraduate admission, when doctor axial length, yeah, axial length they ask. They wanted the axial length map.
What about HRT, hormone replacement therapies?
No, about defense, one more small point is they insist that the treatment should be done only after the age of 20. They don't accept 18. So what Dr. Jyoti said, NDA and AFMC, because I think the maximum age at which they admit is 19 years. So they don't accept LASIK in either NDA or AFMC.
That was for post-graduation. That was for post-graduation.
Oh, okay.
Post-graduation.
Yeah, I had a patient from NDA, and the maximum age limit there is 19 years. So LASIK cannot be performed before 19 as per the Indian Defense protocol.
Sir, another reason they ask for axial length is high myopias also they are not taking, sir. With or without, that is another reason. They want to know whether the person has cheated by doing a surface ablation.
No, and probably they're looking at good contrast also. And it's known that high myopes have a poor contrast. So that could be actually a logical reason. That's maybe they should ask for a little more.
Per se, laser vision correction is not a contraindication, I mean, not a exclusion criteria for getting into defense. All the three forces, as far as my knowledge is concerned. with certain, some
You're
quote
talking
unquote
about myopia, sir. High myopia is not a contraindication.
High myopia, they have to have a good contrast sensitivity, good color vision. All this will come into picture.
There is a question here whether railways, Nagbhushan has raised the railways post is LASIK contraindicated. Can Dr. Elan answer this?
Sir, it was not very clear, sir, what you asked.
The railway employees is LASIK contraindicated for them. The
railways. We're asking about railways, sir.
Railways.
Sir, railways, I did surface ablation for a few, but I have not seen the data. What is the rule there, actually? I did surface ablation for a few. They've got into the jobs also.
Okay. Dr. Nagbhushan.
Even air hostess also come asking for LASIK, but for them vision requirement is not important.
Okay.
Yeah. One of my classmates is...
We can't hear you, doctor.
Your voice is breaking, sir.
We can't hear you. Can you repeat that? Okay, I think we lost him. What about the...
So for railways, I'm sorry, I'm just interrupting. For railways, it depends upon the category. There are 3 categories, A, B, and C. Basically, A1, A2 is all for locomotives. So for locomotives, no form of corneal refractive surgery is admissible. Be it surface, be it flap, or be it even ICL. So they have strict guidelines, and they do a pre-op, during recruitment, they do a care reading checkup. If they have any smallest of a doubt, they do get a topography and get it checked from a corneal refractive surgeon. So railways, they're very much sure on that. And for category B and C, refractive surgeries are acceptable, but the only thing is the best seeing eye should be 6/9 and plus. So for category A, which is the locomotive drivers and all, or the mechanical trackman layers. So for them, they all come under A1 and A2. So they are not eligible for any refractive surgery for recruitment. So this was the railways. And coming to the defense, those who are on field, I've seen their memorandum which says that you cannot have a previous refractive surgery, or even if you have, the 3 criteria are that axial length should not be beyond 24 millimeters, care reading, and the central corneal thickness should not be below 460 or 450 micron or 450. So these are the national defense, means specifically for the Air Force. But for office work, clerical, the other which are not on field, they accept refractive surgery.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Priyank. It's very good information, and it's really good information that we all came to know about it, about railways. And do you have any additional information about other employees, CGHS, the central government employees like police, defense? Defense, we covered it. Any additional information beyond what Dr. Elan said about defense?
So for regarding the other defense like police and all, I'm not sure. But again, there was one thing, I'm not sure. I'm not seeing the memorandum personally, but verbally the candidates do say that. But unless until we see, we cannot accept. But other departments such as archaeological and the librarians, although which comes under again the CGHS, they accept. Even ICL is accepted for them with the best corrective vision of 612. Like I had done one patient who had done an ICL. His maximum or best corrected vision was 612. And in the memorandum, it did say that any form of surgery, be it corneal or ICL or phakic 612 should be in the worst eye, means 612 and above in both eyes is acceptable. And he's doing very fine, and he's now in Delhi doing under a job.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. Dr. Elan, you wanted to add something?
Yes, sir. Another profession where we should ask for is merchant navy, sir.
Correct. What do they say? What does Merchant Navy people say?
Actually, on the refractive procedure, they don't mention much. But on the glasses and other things, they will not take it. And the vision, they also check the contrast in case of any doubt.
Okay, fine. Very good. And there are a couple of questions here. I think Dr. Vishnath has clarified very well that we have to take the history of, you have to see the contact lens yourself and check yourself for the fit of the lens size. There's a very good point. Size, steep, whether it's steep fit or a flat fit. If it is a steep fit or a flat fit, that again you'll have to wait for much longer than your and movement of the contact lens. You'll have to wait much longer. If you see, that's a very good point he has mentioned. If steep fit, more corneal damage, more warping will be there, and epithelial, thickness mapping, it'll be quite defective if it's pressing at one point. There's a question here, Dr. Jyoti. If a patient who has got a surprise refractive error, how long you wait after the cataract surgery to offer a LASIK or epi-LASIK on him?
First of all, LASIK is not advisable after cataract surgery. I would rather go for a surface ablation, because when you apply the suction, it may not be advisable after the cataract surgery. How much time to wait? I'm not sure.
Okay. So we have done a couple of them. See, basically, it's the stability of the cornea. With modern surgery, there's no regression of the wound, or there's no, this thing. Normally, my take home is give the patient enough time to accommodate. If many times they create a, question, and then you offer it, even if you give it, at a subsidized rate, they'll say they'll get used to it in 2, 3, 4 months' time. So I would, if the patient is really worrying you, bothering you, there's no harm in doing it at the end of 3 months. The same criteria that you would explain. But otherwise, left to me, I would like to wait for 6 months' time. Okay, I think, Dr. Ramesh, you have any questions or any clarifications to offer? Because you are the moderator.
A lot of important questions. As we all know, an ideal patient is someone past 20 years, moderate stable refraction, K reading between 40 and 45, no ocular, orbital, adnexal, or systemic disease. We not only select the patient for the refractive procedure, we also have to select the refractive procedure for each individual eye based on different parameters. The selection criteria for refractive surgery is a continuously evolving science based on the advances in technology, and as and when we collect data and reports coming, peer-reviewed literature, at any point of time, whatever we decide now or the criteria for selection of cases may be modified as and when it becomes necessary. So nothing is dogmatic. For example, the residual stromal bed used to be 250 initially, but we no longer do for such cases. So 300 is now the criteria. Similarly, our capability to diagnose keratoconus because of advances in imaging technology and understanding the corneal biophysics has changed. So it's a continuously evolving process. So we select the patient for the procedure, we select the procedure for each eye, and based on our knowledge, we keep modifying this. Regarding contact lenses, I have a slightly different opinion. Contact lens wearers, it's not only the stability of corneal curvature, there are so many other things which you have to keep in mind. One of the important questions is, why does a contact lens wearing patient ask for refractive surgery? Is it for convenience? Is it the vision is not good with contact lens? That's an important issue. If the patient asks for refractive surgery for the sake of convenience, it may be okay if all other parameters are all right. But if he says, whatever contact lens I wear, vision is not good, then it's a very big red flag. You may be dealing with some corneal problem or any other organic problem in the eye or keratoconus. So you have to be very careful. If the patient says, I'm not happy with the vision with whatever contact lens I use. Second thing is that patients have severe ocular surface changes with contact lens wear. You have to see what is permanent, what is temporary, and wait for all the changes to subside before doing the procedure. It may be changes in the conjunctiva, lids, or in the cornea, or in the tear film. Corneal vascularization is quite common in patients wearing contact lenses for a long time, particularly soft contact lenses. Now you have to differentiate why this corneal vascularization has happened. Is it because of contact lens or is it because of some other ocular surface or corneal disease? It's important to identify the etiology of corneal vascularization in such cases. The etiology is important because that will throw a light on potential complications. Second, the presence of corneal vascularization can cause bleeding during surgery, particularly if you are doing a stromal procedure and raising a flap, and the presence of blood in the interface can affect your results, can affect your haziness of the cornea, and post-treatment, the haziness of the stroma, in these cases, can create confusion about either corneal edema or diffuse stromal keratitis or BLK in these patients. Regarding the corneal curvature, there is no definite rule when the corneal curvature comes back to its original state after stopping a contact lens. It's quite variable, though what has already been discussed generally applies. There are surprises and there are individual patients where things can be different. So what I do is, when I check the vision, I note down the vision, best corrected visual acuity, K reading, and corneal thickness, and repeat the whole thing every 2 weeks once, and at least 3 consecutive readings must be stable. It may be after 2 weeks it starts becoming stable. It may become stable after 6 months. I had a patient where the cornea becomes stable after 6 months. So only after it becomes stable, you take up the patient for treatment. It's quite demanding. Patients will be in a hurry. They are pressurizing you. But if you have to stick to rules, you have to follow this. So after discontinuing the contact lens, the K reading, corneal thickness, and best corrected visual acuity has to remain stable for at least 2 consecutive readings, 2 weeks apart. Many patients hide the fact that they are using contact lenses because they just want to go through the procedure at any cost. And if there's any problem, they're only going to blame you. These are the few observations regarding simple things like diabetes and collagen vascular disease. No two diabetic patients are identical. What type of diabetes you're dealing with? Is it a juvenile onset diabetes, insulin dependent diabetes, or is it type 2 diabetes? What is the duration of diabetes? What is the status of control of systemic disease? What end organ complications has the patient already has or likely to have? Let's consider a patient who is around 35 years, recently detected diabetes, perfectly normal, otherwise no end organ, target organ disease, and retina is perfectly normal. Then you probably can go ahead with the refractive procedure, explaining 2 things to the patient. One is that the lens changes can occur quite earlier in diabetics compared to non-diabetics. And so there's no guarantee for how long, whatever you have achieved 6566 with refractive procedure can be maintained if other complications or lensoplasty is set in. Second, let us say a patient has got early NPDR, non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy, a few microaneurysms. A few microaneurysms are away from the macula, may not that matter that much, but you can safely tell that the patient, there's a likelihood of diabetic retinopathy worsening over the next 5 years. So your refractive results may last for 5 years and other aspects of health and eye problems may creep in after 5 years. The same few microaneurysms, if it is near the fovea, I would be extremely cautious because any worsening of the systemic condition or any procedure on the eye can worsen this and immediately the vision can drop down because of worsening maculopathy, and then the whole attention shifts to the retina rather than the cornea. So it's only explaining to the patient and taking a very judicious decision, protecting yourself from any future litigation, and also protecting the patient and diverting his attention to what is more important than avoiding spectacles. The same thing applies to systemic collagen diseases. Now, do I ask the patient, do you have rheumatoid arthritis? Do I ask the patient, do you have SLE? Patient does not know what is SLE, what is rheumatoid arthritis. I need to ask for symptoms of these diseases. Do you have the following symptoms? Or do you have any systemic illness or disease for which you have consulted a doctor or you have been admitted to a hospital where you have undergone investigations for any systemic disease? What was the diagnosis? What is the treatment? If the patient says nothing, then you ask for the history. Do you have hypertension? Do you have any renal problem? Do you have any skin rashes? Do you have any joint pains? All those symptoms of the systemic diseases we have to ask, and if there are any symptoms, then we go on investigate further. Whether the systemic disease is severe enough to warrant contraindicating this procedure is something which has to be judiciously taken. If it's a very mild disease, it's only on blood tests or immunology the diagnosis has been made. There's no end organ, target organ deformities. Then some patients, some doctors still go ahead with the refractive procedure, explaining clearly that as a rare case, complications can happen, dry eyes can come up, corneal melting can happen, corneal sterile ulcers can happen, even without refractive procedures. So these are some of the things which we'll practically look into before going through the procedures.
Thank you, sir.
Regarding presbyopia patients or peripresbyopia, somebody who is past 35, particularly if hyperopes, the lower edge is nearing the presbyop, myopes 38 to 45. Then discussing about near vision, options, monovision, undercorrection, and then various modifications of the laser procedures which have come up, the uncertainties have to be discussed. One of the practical things regarding monovision and undercorrection we can do is to give the patient contact lenses of the appropriate power and show them what monovision looks like and what will be their experience with undercorrection in one eye, or which eye has to be undercorrected. Is the simple contact lenses they can use for a couple of weeks, and the patient can decide what they want, and then we can go ahead with the procedures. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Lot of practical tips. I think we'll just take two very good questions. I welcome Dr. Vinay Pillai. Nice to have you, Dr. Vinay, here. Question is, in divers, may it be for fun or profession, would you prefer a LASIK or a surface ablation? So Dr. Vinay, anything else you would want to add? Why this concern and what is your thought process in?
Coastal city, I'm in Cochin now. We do get a few people who, go for diving, either for recreational purposes or professional, and they do come for refractive surgery. So the worry is in terms of decompression and bubbling. So should we be offering a flap-based or procedure which has an interface, or something like a surface procedure which has got no interface? Any opinion or suggestions? I mean, I don't have an answer. It's the reason why I put it across.
So personally, at least what we do in our practice is anyone who is in any sort of, other than the regular office work or house, into any contact sports or scuba diving, they may not injure, but anything, our first preference has always been a surface, especially for sports. And I think we can consider scuba as the same, but probably till it heals, we should just ask them to avoid. But in our practice, we generally prefer surface for all these athletically or sportively active people. Our logic is just the same. That flap is never going to heal. So, and I would say surface would be my choice. Anyone would want to opine on this?
If I may add, Dr. Deepti, not just the flap. Again, the edema comes into play because of sudden pressure differences.
Correct.
So both the reasons, surface would be a better option.
Surface would be
true.
I think the acceptance of surface is very high now for various reasons. And we have shifted over to surface in majority of the cases long time ago. The only thing is, especially in the West, they care a lot about patient comfort soon after the surgery, which is not so in our Indian conditions. And the second fact is pain. There are, we will deal with them. The patients can be as comfortable as LASIK with LASIK with surface ablation. There are ways and means of achieving it. We have gone through the drill. I think we'll certainly share that. I think given for anybody for that matter, our first priority should be surface ablation, and that's the best way to preserve the cornea. See, now 6 months later, so referred cases I've tried to remove or re-ablate for regressions or whatever it is. It's like taking a dosa from a pan. See, 5 years later, the flap never heals, never adds to the strength of it. I think we'll have to change our mindset, and how much comfortable the patient is on first post-LASIK day is forgotten within a week's time. Week later, there is no difference between surface and flaps. I think there is no reason why we should be doing a flap unless there is a specific indication of a flap surgery. That's my personal opinion. I think a lot of surgeons have shifted over to surface ablations, which is the best.
True.
And a few points I would like to say is, a few things are very important in preoperative assessment. It's been told already, but you measure the mesopic pupil size. I've seen patients who are very uncomfortable after LASIK, and later you go and see that their mesopic pupil size is 7 millimeters. So if you knew that before, you can have a larger optical zone for these patients. You can go up to 7.5. So measuring the pupil size in dim light, there are various methods of doing it. That's one thing. And all ophthalmologists, I think she mentioned it, refraction is a forgotten art. So learn doing a fantastic refraction. That is the only one which will make you a perfect LASIK surgeon. The LASIK surgery itself is quite simple. The machine does everything. You're going to just control a couple of buttons, but your preoperative assessment is one of the most important thing. Do a good refraction yourself, and the most importantly, before you ask for any LASIK instructions, do a streak retinoscopy on these patients. There are a lot of people who have keratoconus, a lot of people have form frustae. If you do streak retinoscopy, it's not in our table at all. Keep a streak retinoscope next to you and do the streak retinoscopy. That's the first thing you should do before even you talk about LASIK. Because you talk about LASIK, then you realize he has got form frustae. So these are a couple of points I would like to And we have all these charts. We have developed all the beautiful charts. Documentation, I think we should learn from Dr. Vishwanath. He has got documentation right from first case. He's got everything written down meticulously. I think that's something we'll have to do it. The second, Dr. Jyoti, I would like to stress here that all these parameters, when they come back later and they do change the doctors, they go out of country and they need to carry all the preoperative data that they have. It's not only you are going to keep it. We have a format, we will share it in due course of time. You give it to the patient so that patient carries what are the K readings that he had, what is the corneal thickness he had before the LASIK, what is the axial length he had, what are the Schirmer's, all these parameters that you detect. Kindly make a chart of it and share it with the patient. It will go a long way in the patient's life. Yeah, with this, I think, Deepti, you carry on.
And I'll just share a format. We can take Dr. Banu's question. She asks, is there any time limit after which the patient can do an air travel? So anyone would want to take that up? Wants to travel by flight, is there a time limit after which they have to travel?
There is nothing much. If surface ablation, 1 week later they can travel. Flap also, it's not like going up the mountain or where it's highly rarefied. All the cabins are well pressurized. You will be able to. I do not know actually how, but a lot of patients come from out of the country and they get it done, and 3 days later they fly back. So whether it's a very good question, I think Ramesh, you know about it, or Solanki, you know about it? Any restrictions in the flight? Anybody else? We will cover that later. We'll get an authentic reply.
Sure.
Good question.
So this is, yeah, please continue.
No, the only thing is that it's a totally air-conditioned, closed environment. So dry eye should be kept in mind, and the patient should be carrying her refresh, whatever the tear supplement drops in the cabin baggage to be used continuously, at least once an hour during the flight times.
Yeah, so practically at least we have not had issues. We have had patients flying off in 3-5 days. Only specific thing they ask us the proper prescription for at least a year so that they can carry the liquid. Otherwise, they don't allow the drops, especially if they're traveling 1 day and 1.5 days. So just give them a good prescription for a little longer time, which will be asked. So this is a case sheet which we have developed after a lot of thought process. Everything from whatever Dr. Jyoti has covered to your pre-LASIK questions, your assessment, inclusive of the questions you should ask, your optum should ask, has been created meticulously. Probably I can share a copy of this in the WhatsApp group, and all of you can make changes, and anything missing in your charts, I think we can add it. So this also has all the types of refraction in one place. So when you're doing your data entry, it's very easy, along with the surgical notes. So we have put a lot of effort in creating this in our practice, so we can share this. So I think we had a few case presentations. We can carry it over next session next week. And it's already 10:15. So if nothing else, I think we'll wind up for the day. It has been a very, very informative session. I think we have covered most of the patient selection criteria. And we look forward for a good session. Very important session next week would be of refraction. So if you have your key optometrist who does LASIK refraction, we can invite them. I think they'll really benefit from this. And we'll probably have a YouTube live next time so that we can have more than 100. So you can certainly involve your refractive optometrists for the next meet. So
Deepti, before we close, we have all the directors of Jyoti LASIK Vision Center are here. I see Dr. Madhav Honnoti, Dr. Vishwanath, and others. Dr. Ramesh has spoken, Dr. Sridhar. I would appreciate if you can put in a word from your experience. And Dr. Honnoti, Dr. Vishwanath?
They have to switch on their videos.
You'll have to switch on the audio and video. Dr. Anand is here. I mean, they have all sacrificed. As I said, even in it's a company. All companies are meant to take profits, and none of the directors have taken any profits so far. and none of the directors have taken even the, the dividends from the company. So we have plowed back every pie that we have generated into the company itself. So I would appreciate if all of you can put in a word. Dr. Honati? Maybe we can have, I think, Dr. Vishwanath?
Yeah, actually the group practice started after when Gainwell Medivac was closed abruptly. So that's how the group practice started, because the investment is very high, one cannot afford, and very difficult to maintain. So that's how the Jyoti Lasik was started, and it's doing well. In the beginning also, we never planned not to go for
Hello. Yes, doctor.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, Dr. Vishwanath.
So anyhow, luckily we are upgrading the center as well required, changing the whatever even the scan machines, even latest topography we have got. Now, whatever is the new things are coming, we are actually upgrading to do better work and give good results. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Doctor. Dr. Prashant and Dr. Honati.
Nothing more. You have already spoken everything, and we have been successful for the last 20 years, and we are doing well.
Thank you. Dr. Prashant? Unmute.
You have covered everything that needs to be said and told. There's nothing really to add from JLVC. It's the only thing. See, we ever since we had JLVC, we've been having similar discussions, in-house discussions for such a long time. For nearly 20 years, we've been discussing, and all our practices, all our, we have upgraded our skills, everything through JLVC. Every time I always had a feeling, why are we restricting all this amount of information that we are sharing? We just amongst ourselves. Today, I'm extremely, extremely happy that we're in a position to sit with so many other people and share whatever we used to do for the last 20 years. Let's keep it very, very informal. And the motto, as I always say, is collective learning. Each of us will learn from, there's no delegate, no speaker here. Each person is going to introduce a topic, and all of us should contribute our ideas and thoughts, so that, there's collective learning is the motto of the whole session. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity, and thank you to all the delegates who have, come and sat at 9 o'clock in the night, and very nice to see so many.
I see Dr. Somnath and Dr. Shrikant here. Can you please put in your inputs? Dr. Somnath is currently the president of our company. Dr. Shrikant?
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Am I okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much for organizing such a beautiful session. Let it be an ongoing thing, and it is aptly suits our center, which is dedicated to refractive surgery. So we have got the best of teams, and then speakers like Preeti and all who have shown a lot of interest. They add a lot of value to this Zoom session. So let's hope to continue like this. And we are also upgrading our facility to keep up with times. Thank you.
Shrikant? Okay, I think we will have rest of the people. Dr. Deepti, carry on.
Sure. I would request all of you to message me about the cases you would want to present, so that we can divide it and have it presented one at a time. So please bring the cases. If there's time, someday you can directly do a screen share, or you could discuss with me or post it to me beforehand. And that's it from our side. Thanks to each of you. Thanks to the entire team and all the delegates. And I think it was an amazing kickstart to the whole program. So thank you.
I should thank Karnataka branch of ISMI, SICS all the team members. And this Zoom is hosted by them. And and this program is not sponsored by any company. So even ISM SICS is not sponsored. We don't take any sponsorship from anybody. Even the contribution is done by the doctors to run the show and to be self-sufficient instead of depending upon a pharma or trading company. So with that, good night, and thanks to everybody who contributed to this meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Shall I end the program?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, one and all. Thank you.
And